Welcome to the Muck Out, equine research ready for your horse, where we dig into the latest and most valuable findings on evidence-based horse training, equine movement, equine behaviour, and how to apply this information in active practice within your horse's lives to improve the quality of their lives, the quality of your life, and also your success rate at achieving your individual expectations of them. I'm your host, Nancy Ellison-Murray, and in today's episode, we're focusing on the significance of repetitions and learning states. Well, this is a significant episode because it is the first of many, hopefully many more to come. It has been a long-held dream and goal of mine to develop a reliable source of information for the equestrian community broadly that actually delivers evidence-based, actionable information regarding horse training, movement, and behaviour to you and your horses. Fundamentally, in my long-held endeavour to improve your horse's welfare, well-being, and bring them closer to their individual telos. As an equestrian professional who spent many, many years and many hours over those years driving or working with my hands and my eyes, podcasts have become invaluable sources of easily digestible information for me to access, and I owe the quality and success of my life to the ones that I have been able to listen to. I can't see any of us living in a world where we actually have more than enough time to take in the full focus on learning everything we might want to and need to. So my aim, and I'll drop another word in here, my opus, is to bring the actionable information to you in a way that can complement your already busy lives, with undoubtedly working hard to pay for your horses to improve the quality of their lives and your success rate at achieving your expectations of them. Life has also thrown me demands loudly to pivot. And from those significant moments, they have resulted in me needing to find other ways to communicate to you the information that I am so motivated to share with you to improve the quality of your horse's lives and your lives as a result of that. So with all of that said, it's actually time to get out of warm-up mode and into the core of this session. Yep, I'm nervous, so let's rephrase that as a positive arousal state, which you'll find out why I'm calling it that later on in this episode. Practice makes perfect, but only if we stay clear of distress-biased learning. Practice doesn't make perfect. Repetition does, but not endless repetition. What your horse does and what you do more, your brain and your body learns to do more of. Your horse also learns throughout doing with the body, and the result of that is that the brain learns from what the body does. The more your horse's body and your human body does something, the more it will want to do it. This is the same for the cognitive process of learning. The more both of our species does something, the more the body and the brain will work together to increase the supportive software, I'll call it, and the hardware, I'll call it too, to support the energy use behind it. Since we're talking tech and computer lingo, RAM, random access memory, is a really important factor to consider. Yes, I'm talking something that has the equivalent of, say, your computer's random access memory. Areas of our brain and your horse's brain have different hardware, which prioritizes the capacity to store and manipulate things in the short-term memory pathways, which are actually where the primary learning occurs. Your horse's hardware, where the RAM is located, for example, or its prefrontal cortex portion of the brain, is much less developed than yours. So therefore, it has a smaller RAM and really can only operate a couple of, say, programs at once. Unfortunately, there's also no split screen mode, so no dual tasking if it is requiring any advanced cognitive processing, for example, learning something. So how does this affect what we ask of it? And in particular, how does it affect your horse's capacity to repeat tasks, questions, or movements? Well, the reality is that if you are repeating tasks that the horse is learning, it is heavily dependent on the RAM, the random access memory we mentioned before, which in biology terms is the fuel stores located in that prefrontal cortex portion of the brain that are actually supplied to the areas by blood. Unfortunately, in your horse's case, it has a much smaller prefrontal cortex with much less blood flow than, say, you do, or even your dog does. Not that much less than your dog, for example, but a bit less. The rules of repetition that I'm going to sort of talk into more still apply, though. This is super important. If we continue to repeat successful patterns, we and they, your horses, learn, right? Yes, but only if we repeat those responses and those patterns of behavior before failure has occurred. If we continue to ask for a question, so provide those aids and then achieve a successful answer over and over again until the horse cannot answer with a maintained quality or a reliable response, we're actually training something else. We also usually don't know what we are training, unfortunately, because we are now no longer in control of what the horse is learning because the horse's survival learning has taken over. Its limbic system of the brain is now working directly with the prefrontal cortex to make the best decisions it can to survive. If we reach this point in our training responses from the horse, the nervous system starts to problem solve of its own accord. And it starts to doubt the previously learnt responses it's already supplied and actually look for other possible solutions and responses to the stimulus that's continuing that might then relieve the now stressful discomfort state of neurological or physical fatigue. But we'll just talk neurological fatigue for now. Bear in mind that neurological fatigue always does become physical fatigue as well, though. So this brain state of your horse is fundamentally stuck in, heck, what I was doing before wasn't working, so I'd better try and make some more neural pathways to try and solve this new persisting current state of discomfort. And that fundamentally is called training to failure. What is failure? Well, failure is when things get hard to maintain the quality of, or the response of the quality declines. So you might think, okay, this is good for developing fitness though, isn't it? You know, we keep repeating something till we're tired or the horse is tired, and then we continue that for a period of time. Yes, for musculoskeletal fitness, it is very helpful to develop fitness because that triggers adaptation processes for the body to then go, oh, I better prepare myself better for future physiological stresses. But it doesn't actually work with neurological learning, which is exactly what happens when a task is being learned for quite a long period of the early learning phases. We have to be careful asking for much at all in the regions of distressed biased learning, I'm going to call it, because like I mentioned earlier, this is when the horse's innate action patterns of response take over and survival becomes the highest priority, which for the horse is fundamentally based around looking for whatever has elicited flight mode in it, particularly if it's moving its limbs. Which, let's be honest, is most of the time when we're working with performance horses or working horses, we're expecting a movement response, and well, that's going to require a movement of its limbs. So I mentioned before distressed biased learning. Let's get something clear. Stress isn't bad, but we have to differentiate it from distress. In fact, stress is actually a vital factor in learning because it is the state in which activation of learning occurs, which has arisen from a change in the situation that the horse is in or the human's in, or a motivating stimulus. Say, for example, hunger or a loud noise that's unexpected. So without some level of arousal, learning won't occur. So we have to apply something which is going to result in arousal or motivation from the horse for the horse to learn to do something with that or relieve that stimulus. But it's really important that we maintain a positive arousal state of learning for our horses, in which that state, that is where the consistency of the reliably improving response is occurring. After this point of decline in consistency of that quality of response has occurred, or the response is no longer reliable, you are heading towards a rapid change into the distress levels of arousal, which results in a distressed, biased learning state. When this place and this state of learning has been reached, quite frankly, we as trainers are no longer in control of the learnt outcome anymore. And that's why we call it a distressed, biased learning state. We have to maintain the learning on the rising side of the stress curve. For anyone who's seen sort of the stress curve effectively, they'll understand what I'm talking about. And this is basically a state of motivational, the stress levels increase to the top of the curve, and effectively that's where premium performance is occurring. And maintain that and stop asking for more of these repetitions before it heads down onto the falling side of the curve. And this only occurs, we can only maintain this when we maintain the horse in a positive arousal state. So obviously repetitions are important, and we need to know when, how many to do and when to stop effectively. And it can be tricky to recognize positive arousal states, and that's probably another podcast that I'll need for that one, as well as negative arousal states. But fundamentally what we need to be aware of is that there are actually fairly given rules in how many repetitions you should be expecting your horse to do consistently before we're heading into the risk side of the downward curve, into a distress-biased learning state. So what is a good number of repetitions to reach or develop on any learning response? Does anyone know? Yes, well, fortunately they do. World-leading equinorthology scientists such as Paul McGreevy and in particular Dr. Andrew McLean have researched this and recommended that learning new skills, and this is regardless from the human wanting to separate it into physical and mental, should be taught to our horses in sets of 3 with frequent and long breaks from that particular learning, neural learning pathway. So this is absolutely vital for the regions of the brain to then maintain energy and re-energize with absolutely necessary biochemical fuel sources that keep those pathways away from that fatigue, distress-biased learning. So we need to train in sets of 3. We need to maintain accuracy and the successful response of the horse. Now, this is all on you as the human asking the questions. If the horse can't maintain the response, the question is not yet obviously achievable for the horse, or perhaps it's not being consistently asked. Rest for an absolute minimum of 2 minutes. This can be actually undertaken while doing another entirely separate task with the horse that the horse has previously learnt to obedience level. Now, obedience level is where the horse may understand the task enough to reliably respond with the correct response to the aid within 2 seconds of asking. It helps to sort of think of this break as a cognitive break rather than a physical break, unless there is a physical fatigue element evident. Then you do actually need to wait again until the horse has recovered physically, until you can expect the cognition and that brain tissue to recover enough to continue that learning cycle. And that's usually at the point where you start to think about perhaps readdressing this learning another day. Lastly, you need to allow complete rest days. We now know that horses that have training, handling, or novel learning undertaken for more than 4 days per week are strongly associated with very steep and significant elevations in health-lowering stress states, such as metabolic syndromes and EGUS, which is equine gastric ulceral syndrome. So this is really important to bear in mind. We can't always be asking for learning and development from our horses, and this recovery time is absolutely vital to actually enable the effectiveness of what we ask in both physical fitness and cognitive learning processes. So in some cases, if we have individual horses that might be more sensitive and take a little longer to adapt to tasks than we ask of them in learning, we need to actually maintain following these principles of training to actually make sure we maintain a distress-free biased learning state, which is absolutely vital for their health and welfare. I think all of us are going to be served better and reach our outcomes more effectively if we reframe what we ask of our horses to try and reach the ideal of reducing that cognitive load and understanding how this actually fits into their physical expectations. It's absolutely vital, really, to provide appropriate and fair welfare-promoting environments for them, particularly when we look to apply the information we have now based on recent up-to-date research, which just continues to grow. Some golden rules to think of at the end, and really important messages to take away. If the horse is physically stressed, and this stress occurs whenever the horse fatigues, it will become cognitively stressed. We must aim to keep these horses' stress levels to motivating levels and not fatiguing levels. We do this by training single question, single aid responses in singular contexts, with repetitions that actually help the horse learn, and insisting on appropriately timed rests to reoxygenate and fuel the horse's very differently shaped brain tissue. And finally, remember, if you train to failure, You are not training the correct response. And if you train to stress, you are really just training stress. So that concludes our episode 1 of the Muck Out, Equine Research Ready for Your Horse. I hope you gained some valuable insights to enhance your understanding and application of horse training in movement and their behaviour. This episode 1 was called The Significance of Repetitions and Learning States and Staying Away from Distressed Biased Learning. If you have any questions or suggestions for future episodes, feel free to connect with me via email, the YouTube comments, the episode comments on the website, or through the website contact form. Make sure you subscribe for more dives into practically applicable equine research. Now, to celebrate the fact that I got through this episode without completely falling off my chair or completely stuffing things up, hopefully I'll edit out all the errors so you can't actually tell where I've stuffed things up. Head to my website at www.resetequine.com where you can actually view the transcript of this podcast, and the podcast link will be listed, and where you can also access the links to any research that I referenced in what I spoke about today. Also, on top of that, if you would like to partake in my little celebration of finally starting this long-held dream of mine with episode 1, and you would like to access the digital training session time and repetition guideline I've done up, follow the link on that page to sign up to the mailing list, and I will send that through to you. Until next time, and I do hope there is a next time, enjoy your horses as they are.